Welcome back to Joy's Love Story. I've had my little break. Lasted a little bit longer than an hour, but it still technically isn't night yet. I've managed to settle down my emotions temporarily to hopefully get a good start on this part of the story before I fall apart again. This is Chapter 5, The Vigil I Kept while waiting to find out what happens with Priesty. Since he was going into hospice, my curiosity kicks in. I decide I want to know what hospice is like for those at end of life. Hospice hadn't played a role in the deaths of any of family members that I was close to. Scratch that. It played a small role in the passing of my father, but it was a very short one, if I remember correctly, and me not having any sort of transportation was not there for it. It was my mom being there with him at his end. But regardless, I go onto YouTube and I start looking up videos about hospice and end of life. There are a couple of fairly good content creators out there that are hospice nurses that give you some very clear, basic information about what all the different processes are like, what happens to the person as they approach their passing, the role that the hospice plays, what is left to the family to do, that sort of thing. One of the things that I came across earlier on was a video talking about as people are dying and appear to be unconscious, are they aware of what's going on around them? What study has been done seems to indicate that they do have some awareness of what's happening, although there seem to be other things going on within them, so we can't be 100% certain exactly what it is that they are registering. But something that has been noticed is that a lot of the terminally ill respond fairly well to music that is being played. Not that it's making them better, but where they might be agitated, a lot of times they might be less agitated and calmer when music is playing. I got it into my head that I was going to start sending Priesty links to music on YouTube and try to vary the theme of the music from night to night. Some nights I would send one song, some nights I'd send 2 or 3. I remember the very first song that I sent to him was Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra, because it's one of those songs that I think you have to be a rock not to start feeling at least a little better listening to, even if you're not feeling great. At the end of the song, they're talking about how it is time for Mr. Blue Sky to leave, Mr. Night to take his place. But there's always the wait for Mr. Blue Sky to reappear again. At that point in time, it seemed like a wonderful song to share. That was the sort of thing I started doing. I have songs about different topics. 1 or 2 nights, I shared music from World of Warcraft. It drove me nuts because I have a very, very vague memory of us talking about music at some point in the past, but I couldn't remember if he had told me what type of music he enjoyed. All I could do was share music that I knew and felt would be good to share with him. I did try to look up some music that would have been more popular when he was in high school and college. Inserted a couple of those songs. Every now and then, he would very briefly show being online for a minute or two before going back to away offline. When he was showing as away, Battle.net app would say last online so many minutes or so many hours or so many days ago. So it was like a way of keeping track of if he was still with us. And if he had, managed to get online, wonderful. He was still with us. What I didn't want to see was him showing completely offline on the app, not even away, just completely offline. I think that happened very briefly a couple of times, but it would pop back up showing him as away within a couple of days. That continued for a month. I think at some point I had finally stopped sending the music links to him simply because I was just running out of ideas of which songs to share. I was also getting busy with other stuff at this point in time. My sister and I were also trying to deal with the mess that was our parents' living trust that had not been getting administered as it should have been. It was very difficult for me at that time trying to do my share of the work on top of thinking about Priesty. And again, for me, it's just trying to understand why this one individual was impacting me so much compared to my own family. That it was what it was, and I couldn't put him aside and make myself stop caring or anything. I just kept juggling time that I'd be awake during the day. I would be devoting to working with my sister on the family trust stuff, and then as it got into evening and I was getting close to going to bed, I'd do my research to what songs will I send to Priesty this time. I also had started my spiritual journey at this point. So that got me thinking, because parts of what start coming up in the conversation is the concept of soulmates, soul families, twin flames, karmic relationships, that sort of thing. And so I'm thinking to myself, why do I have these intense feelings for Priesty? Why was there something pushing at me to contact him again at this point in his life? And I had friends saying, oh, this is divine interventions, God giving you a chance to say goodbye to him. And I'll be honest, that idea pissed me off royally. That Priesty and his family might have had suffering prolonged simply so I would have a chance to talk to him again. And it was, something for my sake. And that made me angry. I would never, ever have asked for something like that to happen to anyone just for my sake. Was the deep emotional reaction to him. Perhaps because we were meant to be soulmates. I'm examining the thought and looking deep within myself, and something in me is telling me, no, that's not quite right. That's not why you feel the way you do. And so I'm thinking, well, maybe we were at least part of the same soul family. If you're not familiar with the concept, soul family would be groups of souls that have chosen to be together through multiple lifetimes, sharing roles in each other's physical life stories. That felt more correct to me, that there's a chance that we were part of the same soul family, and just for whatever reason, our chosen lives for this particular lifetime had gone different directions, and so the only way we had to meet was online. At night as I'm going to sleep, after I've found some song from YouTube to share with him, I started creating what I guess could be termed a prayer in my mind as I was going to sleep. It would not be the traditional kneel down next to the bed and put your hands together and pray type thing. It would be, I would just simply lay down and close my eyes and start thinking. I would think about other people in my life, struggles that they're going through, hoping that they could find some positive resolution. I would always end by thinking of Priesty. Over time, I developed it into sort of a little formal expression for him. And it would go along the lines of sending him my love that would give him the strength he needs to do the things he needed to do, the resilience to help him continue on and have the time to do those things he needed to do, the energy to support him and help motivate him to get these things done, to support him as he continued on his journey for whatever time he had left to him, but most of all, send him love, because I had come to the realization that I actually loved him, and there really doesn't need to be any reason beyond that. That in itself had been strange, because, again, looking at why I am feeling such a strong emotional reaction to what he is going through. There had been a day where it was just bothering me, so I'm just thinking about it, and I had come to the realization that what I was feeling inside toward him was somewhat similar, but not identical to what I feel for my sister, who had been working with me now on getting our parents' trust mess straightened out. Not that she had any real interest in it. She was only involved in the trust for my sake. So I realized that I honestly had a genuine love for Priesty. The age difference between us, which I knew was somewhere between the 15 and 20-year range, would have made closer romantic type relationship between us extremely unlikely. I understood that. I knew I loved him. And because of that, I wrote a letter to him that I doubted he would ever see, but it was a way for me to process and deal with what was going on. You had watched the story of my general life journey, the part about the emotional side of things. At one point, I had this impulse to write out my life story. Last year being the 5th year anniversary of writing that story, I had already planned to revisit it, but with a new perspective based on things that I had learned over the past few years, such as the realization that our parents had been narcissists, whereas prior to that it was they were not good parents. Now with wanting to write something for Priesty instead of writing what I had originally intended, I rewrote the parts of my story where he had an impact, being that friend, unlikely friend, unlooked for, as my parents had started bearing down on me with their financial control over my life and the gaslighting and the emotional manipulation. The memory of the friendship after he'd gone no contact, helping me to hang on to hope during the very dark and lonely years. The happiness that I had felt when he had responded to my mail and set me up on his friends list, and here I was expecting to learn about all the wonderful things that had happened to him since we had last talked, because he definitely was the type of person that deserved all those wonderful things to happen. just to fall apart when I find out that he was dying of cancer. Finally, the realization that I truly did love him, that I knew any sort of romantic relationship would have been unrealistic, but loving him as a friend and having that friendship in return, that was all I wanted. And of course, I wanted him to live. That didn't seem unlikely. Another thing that I would do as I was going through my prayer for him, that had developed in my head over time. Be some nights I would kind of wad up part of my bedding and hold it in my hand, almost as if I might have been at his bedside, holding his hand, our fingers entwined, so that even if he was unconscious and not really aware of what was going on, that he might at least feel my hand in his and know that he was not alone, that he was loved, and that there would be someone always with him for as long as he remained. That's more or less what was happening during the month following his last conversation that I had with him, where he said he was about to start hospice. Finally, there was a day where I'm logging into BattleNet and there's a message from him. He said he wasn't sure how, but somehow he had made it back from death's door, and his doctors were going to put him on a new chemo treatment, and he expected that treatment to extend his life maybe another 6 months. Of course, seeing that message made me feel very, very happy, very, very good, knowing that he was still with us. And, asked him, well, did he ever, was this all happening while he was in hospice or what? And he's like, no, I never made it into hospice. He evidently had been in the hospital the entire time. I knew that at this point in time, being able to spend time with his family was going to be very, very important. I didn't want to insert myself into it, asking him questions, but I started getting this urge to go ahead, send him the letter that I had written. I knew it was the wrong thing to do. It was 100% absolutely the wrong thing to do at that point in time, with him just kind of returning to himself, coming to grips with he has got some additional life that he wasn't expecting to have, trying to make sense out of it and how he was going to make use of the additional time available. So at this point, I know I should be leaving him alone, but there's just something inside of me saying, you need to send him that story. You need to send him the letter you wrote. And I am 100% fighting it, not because in some ways it felt awkward and slightly embarrassing with the way at the end of the letter I was effectively bearing my soul, but because I knew it was not something he needed to be seen at this point in his life. Still, there was that something inside of me pushing at me. You need to send it to him. And I would push back. No, I am not going to do that. This is an internal struggle that went on within me for about 3 days. Something inside going, send it to him. Me going, no, I can't. I won't do that. It's the last thing he needs right now. I don't know the source of the voice. Perhaps it was God. But it finally got to the point is you will send this to him, and you will send this to him now before it is too late. no sense of what was meant by too late, just I needed to do it before it was too late. The pressure building within me to send the letter was just so immense I couldn't take it anymore. So I set up a copy of the letter in an online file that I could go ahead and send him the link so that he could open it, since I couldn't send him a text file through the BattleNet app. And I attached a message to it saying, "This is something you probably don't need right now. You may decide that it's better to go back to no contact," because I was 100% ashamed of myself for doing it. And him going back to no contact would be what I deserved for doing it. I sent it. A couple of days later, I log into the BattleNet launcher. He is no longer appearing on my friends list. In the friends chat, there is a message from him. All the message said is, "I don't have the capacity to deal with all this," which I knew. It was why I didn't want to send it to him in the first place. But whatever inside of me forced me into doing it, seeing that he had removed me from his friends and reading his message. All of a sudden, that voice that had been pressuring me to send a letter to him speaks up with, "Job's done." And for those of you longtime Warcraft friends, I bet you can hear it in that good old orc peon voice. That's all it was. Simply, "Job's done." All of the pressure and anxiety that had been building up over this supposed need I had to send him something that he shouldn't have been bothered with disappeared. All of a sudden, I was like, I went from a state of extreme agitation to peace and calm. Something inside of me was, it needed to happen. It had nothing to do with you. That somewhere inside of what you wrote, a message had been inserted that he needed to see. And that's why you had to send it. Perhaps that was a divinely planned moment that needed to happen. Perhaps not. I don't know. I'll probably have no way of knowing until I pass away myself. I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. So I'm just going to have to wait. And now back to no contact with Priesty again. It felt a little rough at first, because he did have a character still back on our original realm that he would play on occasion. I'd be running around doing the things that I would do. There were a couple of times I would catch him out of the corner of my eye, also being online. As much as I wanted to break the no contact just to give him a hug or something, I wouldn't let myself do it. I was at night, though, still doing my prayer for him when I would go to sleep. And I was still occasionally wadding up the bedding in my hand, imagining it was his hand, and I was just holding his hand to help keep him company. I will admit to feeling a bit stalkerish, because I just wanted to know that he was still with us, that he was still active. I would check his achievements occasionally on World of Warcraft website. As long as I could see new achievements popping up, I knew that he was doing fairly well, and with that I was satisfied. And that continued on for roughly almost 4 months, until one day I was thinking to check his achievement progress again. There had been nothing new coming up for about 3 weeks. I don't know, really have no way of it being an indication that he was starting to fail again in his health or anything like that. Knowing him, he had, addition being playing online, he was no doubt probably still working to the best of his ability as he could. I mean, I could think of all sorts of reasons of why he wasn't showing any achievement activity online without it meaning that perhaps he had finally passed away. I would go so far as to even check to see if there was an obituary being posted. As long as I couldn't find an obituary for him, I was satisfied. I was happy. I was glad that he was continuing to survive. That is where I need to leave this video. I am again going to take another break for a little bit. Get some water to replace the water I'm losing through the tears. Organize my thoughts for about what is going to get shared in the next chapter. Peace, love, and joy to you while I'm on my short break. Just in case it takes you a little while before you return to the story, please take care.